Welcome back, everyone, to another Market Conversations. Boy, what a week it has been. Now, the market has gone a little up, it's gone a little down, but the good news is that even though we're not getting those huge, massive gains on a daily basis, the overall crypto market's holding pretty strong at above $1.4 trillion. That is incredible news. And there's, all kinds of great stuff to talk about. I have Angelica in the studio tonight. We're going to discuss, obviously, Flare Networks, yield. She's pretty up to date on a lot of what's going on in and around the XRP space. One of the things I found really interesting is that we got that news Ripple put out there, like a press release, hey, Bill, that another 12 banks got signed, despite all this quote unquote apprehension around the SEC case. Let me go down the scroll here. Wade, welcome to the show. Good to have you. Bill Gould, love to see you. We got Pete Kelly. Hey, Pete Kelly, Scorpion, CKJ Cellmate. All right. So obviously there, I can see the counter here. There are more people watching than are chiming in on the chat, but feel free to fire in your questions. If you have questions around Flare Networks, probably dabble in some Flare Finance. Shigar Gaming, hey, great to have you here. Also, thanks for all of you that are tuning in from Facebook and Twitch tonight, as well as our normal YouTube viewers. If you're new to the show, leave a comment if you have a question. You can also leave a comment in the video itself, which will get addressed immediately, or at least tomorrow afternoon if you put it in tonight. If you're new to crypto, it's always ask questions. There's no stupid questions. It's just a learning process, and we're all in it together. Hey, Ray, good to have you. So let me bring in Angelica, and we will kick off this conversation with, what have you been up to this week? I know that you've been posting some great stuff on Twitter. For those of you that don't follow Angelica on Twitter, it's right there, Angelica at Stardust Networks. Give her a follow. Really bright girl. And I'm really glad to have you here tonight. So what have you seen in the crypto markets this week that's got you excited?
I was just talking to a few people. I'm super excited about everything going on with Flare Networks, as you mentioned. So we can get into that a little bit. A lot of people talking about Dogecoin right now. So if people have questions about that, I definitely want to cover that. I think that we need to clarify what Dogecoin is and how it's different than other cryptocurrencies, as far as not having a hard cap and it being inflationary in nature. As of right now, it has like a 5% inflationary rate. So we have people putting money into Dogecoin thinking that they're going to see the return on investment that they do with Bitcoin, and that might not be the case. So that's one thing that I was actually in the Wall Street Journal recently talking about Dogecoin and some things related to that. And then we can talk a little bit about how Ripple seems to just be going on business as usual, despite all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the SEC case, right?
Right. Well, let's kick it off with Doge. I'll tell you what. I distinctly remember when I came into the space, Doge was here, and I'll the funniest friggin' story. So I had been playing around on Robinhood app. This is 2+ years ago, and I had a balance. I had bought and sold stocks and this, that, and the other thing, put money back into my bank account, and there was a balance. There was this little balance. It might have been $8 or $9. It was nothing. And because Robinhood offered a small section of cryptos, Doge being one of them, I bought what I felt like a butt ton of Dogecoin, right? And then I deleted the Robinhood app off my phone for almost 2 years. And when I got it back up, I was surprised to say that $9 or $10 had grown exponentially. and was able to go into my bank account. And I'm grateful for that. And I had a friend that was telling me, what are you doing? Doge, man, Doge, it's hot. Everybody's talking about Doge. And I said, yeah, it's great. Everybody's talking about it. But I don't see Dogecoin as an investment. I mean,
Right.
sure, it's a great novelty, but I don't see it as an investment. Where are you at with this whole thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because my stance on Doge has actually changed a lot in the past few weeks as I've continued to really research it. It's interesting because the crypto space was a lot different in the last bull rally back in 2017, 2018, right? We're seeing the space. Actually, I think it was Hugo Filion that he's the guy that created Flare Networks.
Right.
He was talking about how last summer was the summer of DeFi, and that's really the truth. I mean, I remember Bitcoin really wasn't even, not even near what it is today, right? And we were talking about all of, like you said, the yield, the farming of coins, getting a return on our investment, things like that. And it's just, how has the space changed? And does Doge have a space in the way that we're doing crypto now? Because there may be some room for an inflationary asset as far as internet micropayments go. We are seeing this digital era that's been thrust forward. And one of the things about Bitcoin is that because it is a hedge against inflation and it has all of these properties that we love about it, like its hard cap and its limited coin supply, right? The 21 million coins, plus however many have been lost, so that supply is even smaller. That's not true for Doge. So we don't have an incentive to hoard it. So that means that if we don't have an incentive to hoard it, then we're okay with spending it here and there. And that might be something that we do have a need for when we're in the internet micropayment space that we're seeing really now that we've had COVID and all of these other things going on.
Well, and I understand that makes a lot of sense, right? Currencies with hard caps can be problematic if they're being hoarded. There's no velocity of money. Basically, our economy is built on a velocity of money, and when the velocity of money slows down or even stops, all kinds of very detrimental things happen in the economy. I understand that. The thing I never got about Doge is it was never really designed to be a functional currency. It's not fast and it's not cheap.
It's not. That's correct.
So therefore, it to me, XRP and XLM are just clearly superior as a payment. Digital
Absolutely.
asset. We'll call it a digital currency. Real quick, before I wanted to, Pete Kelly brought up a great question. He asked him, okay, Nexo, one of the largest lending borrowing platforms on the planet with 1 million plus users, has just introduced a fixed interest option. If you lock up your coins for 30 days, you get a little higher rate. Here's the thing, though. What they did is they reduced their normal rates. So if people don't make any change at all on Nexo, you are going to receive less than you used to. You have to lock up your coins to get the same equivalent that you were getting 2 days ago.
Really? I haven't even heard of that yet.
Yeah, it's brand new. They released it this morning. It'll go live tomorrow. I was kind of bummed, because I'm a Nexo guy and I got Nexo tokens and I'm in their what they call platinum dealy bob, and I did that because of the interest rates on the money that I borrow versus the also it's nice to get a little higher tick on the interest that you earn. Because I'm always working a debt to equity ratio kind of thing. I always want to be earning more interest than the interest that I owe on my loans. Always. Good markets, bad markets, that kind of thing. So anyway, make a long story short, they didn't do anything wonderful. Let's put it that way. This is not a wonderful new thing that's going to add more value to its users. Matter of fact, it's going to force users, if they want the comparable rates that they were getting a day ago, they're going to have to buy Nexo tokens, which kind of could be good because I'm a Nexo token holder. Right. That could benefit me, but I don't know. So Mr. Kelly, that's my answer to that. But let's go into this thing. So let's transition from Doge, the inefficient currency, to Doge, an F asset in Flare, and how does that change or do anything for those of us that, well, maybe don't give a rat's butt about Dogecoin, but maybe just having another token on that in that network can add value and help the network effect reach escape velocity faster.
Yeah, and so kind of to bounce over to Flare Networks away from Doge, like you said. So this FBA agreement, this protocol, for those that don't know anything about Flare Networks, what we're seeing is that it really allows for a mashup of this trustless, permissionless smart contract design. So a very large percentage of cryptocurrencies are not smart contract enabled, and I think I was looking over it today. The ones with the biggest market cap were XRP was one of them, Bitcoin Cash, and I know Doge was one of them, Litecoin, and I think Stellar. And so basically there, we had wrapped Bitcoin. A lot of people remember the wrapped Bitcoin days, right? And it makes Bitcoin more functional because it allows for Bitcoin to, well, in the early days, right, when we did not have the same functionality that we do with all these new DeFi platforms, right? It made Bitcoin more functional by allowing for Bitcoin to be on the Ethereum network and then have those smart contract functionalities.
Right.
But there were issues with this, right? There were issues with centralized third parties being in control of the coins. There were privacy issues. And so what Flare does is this FBA agreement that it utilizes really takes care of all of those issues that we had with wrapped Bitcoin and other things in the past. And so when we consider that, the more, like you said, the more coins operating on this network, the more interoperability we have, the more the ecosystem grows. And it's nice to have interoperability. I am not a maxi, so, I like the idea of being able to seamlessly transact with people that whatever, you can use Bitcoin, you can use whatever currency you want to use, because you'll have that interoperability with me as, say, an XRP holder or a Dogecoin, fanatic, if they're out there. And then we have this whole new thing with NFTs, right? So I don't know if you want to get into those. I don't know if you've been hearing about all this NFT stuff going on.
Well, I think it's wonderful that there's a creative outlet for something unique and scarce. And obviously over time, the market will decide if these creations are truly valuable or not valuable. What I'd like to see in the space is the traditional, quote unquote, like the original NFTs before they were such a thing as non-fungible tokens. Your comic books, your baseball cards, football cards, all these kind of things. The dematerialization of these things adds so much value. Like, are you hip to Michael Saylor's book called The Mobile Wave?
No, I haven't read that one.
If you and I would be gazillionaires had we had picked that book up in 2011 when it was written, because it just beautifully and eloquently laid out the dematerialization of things as they went from physical, tangible items to electrons on an app on a smartphone.
It's crazy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And where that has any real value in the business world is if you are a creator of something, right? You're an artist, you do a comic book, or you're a musician who isn't digital yet, that type of stuff. When you get into this world, right, you get into this world that you're starting to talk about with NFTs and just life digitally on a blockchain, you're talking about taking down the variable cost to produce your product substantially.
Oh, absolutely. Because
that's a value. That is a huge value.
Yes.
And who can stand to reap that value is the content creator, not the publisher, not the engineer, not the company pressing the discs.
Yep.
The actual artist. And to me, that's a huge deal. Real quick before we go, I want to say hola to mi amigo Justin. Hola, mi amigo. Justin's practicing his English. He's a friend of mine here in Costa Rica, mi amigo from Cajon. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, exactly what you said, right? So it's, and it even more than the fact that once you purchase that NFT, right, you're not just buying the digital art itself, you're buying the code as it exists locked up on the blockchain. You are now the end user that has those keys. And so you're actually buying what we would call like property rights, essentially.
Exactly.
And so that, and when we start to consider, so this is a big thing I've been really noticing lately on Twitter, is that we have these newsletters, this ability to write like quote unquote newsletters as content creators. And I was in a Clubhouse room the other day, and Naval had said something along the lines of like a smart contract in every tweet. And then Jack Dorsey, we saw he did the first NFT enabled tweet the other day, and people were talking about it. And I was like, are we going to get to a point where we are compensating every tweet from content creators? Like, I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure they have plans that probably go beyond what we can even conceive of right now in the big tech space, right? But that is a possibility, is that at a certain point, internet micropayments will be at such an economy of scale that we will be expected to compensate the content creator directly. And anybody that is locking up, like you said, collectibles on the blockchain, the dematerialization of the digital era really is here.
It really is. And it's, like any good innovation, it's not something that's going to be a whisper and gone. It takes years. It's going to take years. And I think it's just going to become more and more ubiquitous as time goes on. I think one of the interesting elements, and not a lot of people are talking about this, but it's worth discussing, and that is the fact that these digital assets bring something unique to our experience that us, our parents, and to some degree, some of our grandparents never got to deal with. And that is the fact that these assets are actual bearer instruments. Whoever has the key is the owner. There is no quote unquote chain of custody. There is a record of transaction, but there's no chain of custody. Who has the key is the owner. And the interesting element of that is when we're talking about a Bitcoin, we're talking about its convertibility into dollars or yen or euros,
right,
or its ability to be used as a collateral. That's a pretty straightforward kind of thing. But what about Angelica's intellectual property and NFT? Now that's a whole other bag of tricks. And I think, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but I think it's going to spur an entirely new segment of law.
Agreed.
Now, it might not be law that's taught in law school. It may be law that's implemented in the form of code that we'll call quote unquote governance. But I see that coming. Bearer instruments, none of us are used to dealing with.
Yeah. And this is huge right now with all of this disillusion with the government and civil asset forfeiture and things like that.
Exactly.
Bitcoin is unconfiscatable.
And then you got, so let's tie that into what we're seeing right now. So reports saying that there are upwards to $200 trillion coming from the baby boom generation going to be left to their heirs. Some of them are Gen X, some of them are millennials. But the point is, it's $200 trillion that's going to migrate its way out of the baby boom population as the baby boomers are unfortunately moving on to bigger and better things like heaven and what have you, or whatever. What about when these Gen X's and these millennials in 30, 40 years have the peak cohort, their peak cohort hit, quote unquote, their age limits and start dying off? Now, all of a sudden, right of receivership or wills or, these kind of things, I think they're going to go away. And what you're going to see is it's going to become absolutely mandatory for each and every one of us that are holding digital assets right now to have a trust set up, that the trust is now in charge of the keys and is going to administrate all further downstream use according to the governance that the trust was set up with. Not a lot of people are talking about this, but can you imagine what that's going to do to probate, what that's going to do to estate planning? I mean, it's going to turn all that stuff on its head.
Absolutely. I mean, like you're saying, these, what I refer to as legacy accounts, right? This idea is that it'll unlock. So if, God forbid anything happen, my son, something happens to me, is there a way for me to unlock my assets so that they all go to him? And like you said, we are going to have to figure out a way to make sure that we have some sort of trusted third-party custody system. I have a system set up, but it's crude, right? I expect hey, here's a person that I trust that I know can figure this out if something were to happen. But we don't have this. All needs to be ironed out. And you're right, it will matter legally. It'll matter for custody cases. It'll matter for all of these different things where assets become a real gray area.
Well, I'll tell you, what I did in matter of fact, the very, very first video kind of thing I ever did about crypto, I was on a farm with Justin, as a matter of fact, in Cajon down here in Costa Rica. And it was a couple of questions to the crypto community. Hi, Lori, good to see you. And Channing, great to have you with us tonight too. And I remember asking the crypto community, hey guys, I get the excitement. This is in 2018, early 2018. But the part I don't get is that none of these digital asset companies, I'm talking about Coinbase and Uphold and Nexo was around back then, none of them have in their charter the ability for a customer or client to add a beneficiary. Well, if I died tomorrow and to say Coinbase, Crypto Oz, good to have you. If I died tomorrow, well, because these are bearer assets, they own all the crypto, not my children. This is a problem.
Serious problem, yes.
So I did something really crude too. I used a thing called ProtoMail, which my 23-year-old son said, this is what you do, Dad. Get this thing called ProtoMail. It's an encrypted, super badass email thing. I
have it. Yep, I love it.
And I had to go through and I've got stuff spread out all over the place. So I'm like, okay, here's this account, here's my Google, because you're going to need to get my Google Authenticator and you're going to need this password and you're going to need these keys and you're going to need this on all these different things. And so it took me like 4 hours, but I finally got the whole thing done and I sent it to him. And like a good 23-year-old son, I start getting alerts. Hey, Jerry, somebody in the United States is trying to get into your account. And I had to get on the phone. Hey, Dylan, what's going on? I'm getting all these alerts telling me somebody's trying to log in. Oh, you go, oh, I just wanted to see what you had, Dad. I said, you don't need to worry about what I got till I die. And then it's all yours. So he goes, oh, okay. I said, you're going to get me shut out of these accounts because they're going to think people are trying to, steal. Flag the account and shut it down. Oh, I didn't know. Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, no, and
that's how crude it is. Like we have to come up with our own friggin' chain of custody because the industry isn't providing it for us.
Absolutely. And what a headache is it too? Like you said, I went through the same thing recently where I was getting all my keys together, all my, trying to centralize it in one safe space. And I'm like, this is exhausting. Like just holding on to that is a real custody of keys is something that I've been talking about a lot, because I'm like, every solution we have isn't quite what we need yet. So hopefully, there's so much innovation in this space right now. And I
Yeah.
know that there are people working on this issue and trying to make it better, custody services and things like that. So hopefully we see that change.
Well, I know somebody built this little thing on Ethereum called Safe Haven. So there's an actual blockchain project that is it's solely designed to act as the estate, your digital estate, for passing on to heirs. And so you go through the process with your quote unquote safe haven smart contract. Here's my keys. Here's my this is all the stuff. These are the people that they're supposed to go to. Here are their quote unquote identification numbers, whether it be social security number or whatever your jurisdiction is in your country. But I'll be honest, I wasn't that comfortable putting, my value on a kind of an ERC-20 project that I'm not sure is going to be here, or how legitimate they really are. I mean, we're talking about my life savings. I'm not that thrilled with giving somebody the keys to my life savings.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually just signed up for Global ID, and I don't know if you're familiar with that. Okay.
Yeah, I have I was one of the very first. I am Jerry V. Hall at Global ID.
Okay, gotcha. And so at first I had that same sort of thought. Now I love Global ID. It's so seamless, the way it operates and the verification process. I feel comfortable with the route Global ID is going. I personally, again, my own personal opinion, not investment advice, none of those things, but I think that Global ID really is the future. Insofar as we're going to need a way to verify ourselves on the internet that is secure, because we also have this huge, and this from crypto Twitter, I'm sure, bot problem, right? Bots are just flooding everything. And it's like, there's no quality control on the internet, and we have no way to verify anybody's who they say they are.
There's no doubt about that. I love Global ID. Greg Kidd is one of my favorite guys. He's one of the most low-key billionaires you're ever going to meet. He's just kind of a down-to-earth good dude and a poker player. So I like him. Hey, let's hit Oz, Crypto Oz from Down Under. I think the big issue is accessibility versus convenience. When there is a complete lack of legislative clarity on an asset ownership, especially if it's while holding on an exchange. Exactly. But see, the real world, or at least not real world. That's not fair. The legacy capital markets. If you have a TD Ameritrade account, a Schwab brokerage account, whatever, it doesn't take but an in-office visit to set up a beneficiary for your account.
Right.
And then should something happen, it's a seamless transition. For any of you that have ever had to deal with probate is expensive. It is arduous. It's very difficult. It's uncomfortable. And it takes so much more effort to verify or validate something in probate than it does outside of probate. So for any of you that have assets in this new digital world, I strongly suggest you take some action, whether it be covertly, hey, your trusted wife and or husband or your brother, aunts, whatever, make sure there's a clear line for them to be able to handle the transfer, as opposed to hoping that an exchange, a lending platform, or something of that nature. If you're in the DeFi world, you are basically ass out. There is no support or help. You're going to have to make sure that some other human being has access and can operate through that world because there's no customer service.
Yep, you're exactly right. And actually, I was just talking about how when Coinbase filed for their, I believe it was a direct listing, they actually didn't have a physical address for their headquarters. And so there was some conversation on Clubhouse about like what these like cloud-based systems or businesses, and it's so interesting how we don't, with these decentralized technologies and these DeFi platforms, there is nobody in charge. So you really are relying on your own devices. So people need to understand coming into the space, this is part of it, right? This isn't like, sometimes things are a feature and sometimes those features can feel like a bug. And when it comes to legacy accounts, it feels like a bug, right?
Yep, absolutely. There's some heavy stuff going on here in the chat. Where do I even begin? Brady, you want to throw some stuff out? There's all kinds of conversations going on. Wait a second. Newsflash. This just in. We've got multiple Australians in the stream chat tonight. We've got golf pros. We've got YouTube celebrities. This is my buddy Phil Wright. Hey, Phil, good to have you, man. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm trying to read everything, but not take too much time reading. Here we go. Channing says Ari had an interview today with the Ask CEO, stated there's a 500 bill bot issue with everyone's data on the web. Boy, Channing, I wish I even knew what that was alluding to. Angelica, what do you think that is?
I'm not.
I have no idea what that means.
I don't, so I don't have any insight specifically into what they're talking about, but when we talk about there being a $500 billion problem, I mean, this is true because there's so much with bots. Did they elaborate?
Yeah, hackers sent out bots to tamper Facebook and Google ads, over 50% hacked. Thank you, Jenny, because I was lost. Oh, hey, heirloom heritage. On a serious note to topic, how about beneficiary delegations in crypto? Haha. Maybe allow it to go to the family that can figure out how to onboard. That seems kind of funny. I don't know. So kids, if you can figure out how to get into mommy's Uphold account, you get mommy's XRP.
Hey, my 8-year-old, he walks around calling he always talks about, when people talk about fiat money, he's like, oh, me and my mom are on the Satoshi standard. My 8-year-old.
No kidding.
Yes. He is absolutely all about, I have him on a mini economy system. So I've done this with him since he's been little. I have like cash that I, like fake dollar bills, like Monopoly money, basically, right? And so he earns screen time. So he can pay for his screen time based on the money he's earned doing chores, things like that. But I allow him to have a wallet. And so when he gets that money, he can spend it right away. He can save it in the wallet and use it up when he's got more for something bigger, or he can put it in my mock market that I made for him, and the market changes day to day to day. So now, so sometimes he has more money in his wallet based on the market conditions, or there's a parabolic rally, or it tanks, right? So he has a real understanding of how assets change in value when you have them in the market versus in a savings account versus when you spend it right away.
No, I think that's great. So if he tells you, Mom, I'm just going to keep it in the savings wallet this week, do you go to the closet, put on your Federal Reserve shirt, and come to his wallet and say, son, I'm going to take out 15% because that's how much less valuable your money that you save is because of what the Fed.
Yeah, no. So we actually talk about the reason that you don't want to save over the long term. We have conversations about how he's actually losing money based on the rate of inflation and things like that. So I'm sure when he goes to his dad's house, he's probably talking about all this crazy stuff. I'm like,
no, I don't think that's crazy at all. The whole reason why I started this channel was to interview people so that I could become financially literate, because it was coming to crypto opened my eyes to how much I did not know about value transmission, currency creation, debt, and how it plays a role in everything that we have in our economy. I didn't know anything about anything, it seems like. And here we are 3 years later, and I know just enough to know that I need to keep learning, because this is a big topic. So for you to be exposing your 8-year-old to financial literacy concepts now, I think is brilliant. And if we all had that opportunity, when we were 8 years old, I think the world would be a slightly different place. I honestly believe, this is just my own pet peeve, but I believe financial illiteracy is at the core of much of the social unrest on the planet. I think if people were financially secure, they would be less concerned about other people's political leanings or whatever. When people are secure financially, they tend to not give that much attention to other people's stupidity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. In mental health, we call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's if you're not food, no shelter, like those things matter before anything else matters. So if we have people that aren't economically stable, we can't even take care of the other issues that come next.
Boy, Oz is just whipping out some good ones. Did you read this one out loud?
Me?
Oh, here, wait, we got to start with this one. Go ahead, fire it away.
So yes, you are 100% right. But when a number of governments can't even agree on what asset class we are trading in, we are a long way off that level of assigned access. Unlike currency and securities, there is no legal expectation of value outside of market exchange and speculation. We need that cleared up first. Ooh. Do you want to segue into, is that a good time? Okay, let's segue into.
I think Oz unwillingly opened the door to our next topic. Thank you, Oz.
Yeah, so
sorry.
No, you're good.
My Hawaiian brother.
So it's funny because you actually invited me on the show the first time right after I posted my SEC Ripple video, and at that time nobody was saying what I was saying, right? Like most people were selling, most people were like, we want out, this doesn't look good. And I was like, I think this and this and this, and we'll see how it plays out. And now we are seeing, I feel very confident about this case with Ripple and the SEC. Again, not legal advice, right? That's my personal opinion based on what we saw in the initial hearing. I think the Ripple attorneys absolutely just slayed in the courtroom. I was so impressed. They hit they spearheaded every topic. So like first thing, if we're applying the Howey test, there is no investment contract, right? However, the Howey test is not appropriate for digital assets. It does not apply. And if, you put those two things aside, which seems like it, case closed right there. If we look at former cases like Kick Interactive, right, there was no pooling of assets. There was no ICO, nothing like that. So that precedent doesn't apply in this case. As you mentioned last time, FinCEN has already designated it a currency. That is a governmental body. That is precedent. And then we heard about them requesting, okay, well, how did the SEC come to the conclusion on Ethereum and Bitcoin being currencies? And all of a sudden XRP is a security. So they had requested those documents. And essentially what it sounds like, they didn't allude to this too much, but the decentralized nature is what it seems like they got that currency designation from. And if that's the case, well, technologically speaking, XRP is a decentralized token. And Gary Gensler, who we know is the new SEC chair, he has said actually things can start off a security, but then change over the course of their lifetime. So as more nodes are on a network, as more people enter the ecosystem, tokens become more, most of the time, right? They become more and more and more decentralized because more people are part of the quote unquote governance process.
Well, it's not just the governance process, it's the number of nodes. See, when you look at, and this is the thing, one of the things I find really fascinating about this space, because it's a real departure from the traditional way that you would value a market when you're looking at revenues and discounted cash flows and how you value a company, right? Earnings per share, all that kind of stuff. Well, with these digital assets, what you're actually valuing is the network. See, the token is just a representation of the network. And to understand Metcalfe's law and all the subsequent add-ons that I'm sure will get, there'll be new terms coined here within the next year or two to coin these specific type of network effects. I started investing in XRP early February 2018. It was decentralized technically, and it's only gotten more decentralized as more nodes have come onto the network. And that's, regardless of any UNL, any specific unique node list that Ripple has put out or other people have generated. People are running nodes. I mean, for God's sakes, the
SEC is. I was just going to say that. Yep.
You know what? Great call. I thought, and that's why I wanted you on the show the first time, because I thought you had a great take on it. Now, keep in mind the backstory. I had sold my Ripple when the second Brad Garlinghouse, I sold my XRP the second Brad Garlinghouse did his tweet. That was an individual decision I made as an investor. It had my opinion of XRP has not been swaying. I love it. It's an elegant technology. I've maintained that point, all over the place. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that I did, because the capital that I was able to utilize from the sale of the XRP allowed me to do some other things and also buy back into XRP at a much lower average cost per token than I had when I sold it. So I'm actually in a better position than I was because I sold it.
Mm-hmm. And those of us who saw that tweet from Brad, right? Because he announced it. You remember, obviously you sold then. He tweeted that before the SEC made their announcement, right?
Hang on one second. Brady, producer Brady. Hey, Oz, Brady, somehow Twitter DM, whatever you got to do, get Oz a link. Have him come into studio. Oz, you're here. Let's get you a link to the show. Have you come on in, and then you can just ask your questions, just like you're right here with us. Sorry, Angelica, I apologize.
No, it's okay.
I wanted to get Brady, producer extraordinaire, on that.
No, I'm very flexible.
I know. Thank you. So maybe because I created this little bit of silence, let's bring in Bita Av.
Hey, girl.
Bita always has the goods, and I know she's a big fan of your work. So I'm going to let you two go at it while I wait for Brady to get Oz in studio.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Hey.
It's so Friday. Great to see you.
You too. I was actually watching your video while I was driving on my way home. So I was like, oh, cool. And then I heard at the last, at your exit, you said, oh, you're going to be on Jerry's show. I said, hey, I'm going to see her later.
I know. I was like, I'm going to surprise her, because I was going to message you on Instagram, but I'm like, I'm just going to surprise her if she doesn't know.
Oh, well, I watched it on your video. So I was like, oh, wonderful. I actually have some NFT questions.
Oh, awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm ready. Yeah. I'm ready when you are.
So yesterday, me and Bill Gould were actually I think it was yesterday that we were having a conversation about some NFTs. And he had asked me if NFTs can be broken down as far as, like, can you buy a fraction of an NFT? And as far as I knew, I didn't think you can do that. But Is that something that you can do? Like how does that work? I don't really know.
No. So non-fungible tokens. So this had to be explained to me. And this is the best way I know to make sense of it. So when something is fungible, it means it can be swapped for something else. So think about a $20 bill being able to be cashed out for 2 10s or 4 5s or something like that. It can be swapped for something that is different but holds similar value. NFTs are not like that. They are rare and they're one of a kind. So they are a single unit, if that makes sense. So no, they cannot be fractioned out.
Okay. Yeah, that's what the conversation me and him were having, because I was watching one of the videos and they were talking about how one of the artists, he bought something, somebody bought something for 67,000 and sold it for 1 point something mil, and we were, going back and forth about hey, what if you can buy a fraction of it or something like that? But it's kind of like a baseball card or something like that. I guess you can't cut it in half and sell it.
Yeah, actually, you could take the non-fungible token, right, and then tokenize that.
Yes.
Okay. But
so it'd be no different than saying, okay, I'm going to take, let's say New York, the state of New York and city of New York decided, okay, we're going to tokenize the Statue of Liberty. There's only one Statue of Liberty, right? It's physically located in one spot. But we're going to take that one thing and we're going to create 100 billion pieces of it to put out into the investment world, right? To put into capital markets to see if we can raise money. And now 100 billion people get a 100 billion piece of the Statue of Liberty. I'm not saying they would ever do that, but it's the same process. You take one thing and tokenize it. Now,
how does the second market work? The second market, like I heard somebody talk about, let's say you're an artist, you created an NFT, I bought it from you, and then when I resell it to somebody else in the second market, you get more money, or like, is that because it's within the contract? Like, how does that work?
If you're buying something from a creator, right, and you resell it, you're reselling it on the market. People use the term the second market, but it's just a market.
The secondary market. So does the artist get another cut? No. Like the more you sell it, the higher profit the person has, or like how does that work?
No, once you buy it, it's your property. It's property. It's yours. Once you buy it, it's yours. It's no longer theirs. Now they do have these things that they're doing with content like songs that you can buy the song and use it any way you want, but the artist can sell that song to somebody else also, and they can use it any way they want. So there's no just one way. I mean, there's going to be countless different quote unquote use cases depending upon, and the market will decide which ones are profitable and advantageous and which ones are not. Right? People will do what's advantageous and people won't do what isn't.
And I think things are going to get more user friendly too. Right now, crypto and NFTs, like this seems very, if you're not involved in the space, it can be very confusing with these NFT marketplaces and things like that. I think we're going to see, as we get clarity legally and regulatory clarity, things like that, I think we're going to see more app development and things like that will make this more intuitive and user friendly.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, guess what? We've got a guest from all the way from Australia. Hey, Crypto Oz, what's shaking, man?
Hey, man, how you doing?
Good to have you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I've actually released a few videos this week and kind of getting back in the swing of it. But yeah, listening to you guys talking about so much of the stuff that's just an issue across the board it's incredible. And the NFT space is one of those ones that's definitely incredibly interesting right now. And I think you really touched on the meat of the issue when it comes to an NFT representing an item is so confusing to somebody, but an NFT doesn't necessarily represent just that item. It is an aspect of that item. It could be you're selling the rights to, say, replicate a piece of artwork. It could be that you're selling the rights to the original artwork, and that is the only NFT that represents that. It's just basically the concept of ownership or a contract to ownership to a right in the same way we do traditionally, but in a non non-traditional market. You're putting it into a blockchain that's, as we all know, the way blockchain works, you can't change the original details. You can just add more details on as it goes down the line. So incredibly interesting stuff. And I actually hadn't checked your guys' channels out or seen much content. So just, yeah, wow, great work. Amazing stuff, honestly.
Oh, well, thanks. It's good to have you. I'll tell you, I really enjoyed when you came on the scene. Well, God, it had to be 2 years ago. Late 2018, I think, is when I remember you started spinning up videos, and it was always fun to tune in and get your take. I always thought you were a very intelligent young man who had a perspective that was at least authentic. And one of the things I really liked about you, I will tell you this, is that when you came across new information, you weren't afraid to say, I no longer think this way about this thing, and this is why. And I love that. That's a sign of maturity to me.
Thank you. And yeah, you're right. July 2018. And just a random side tangent on that. The first video I ever released was recorded in the audio of my mobile phone while I was in my bathroom. It was this little tiny ensuite. And it was after listening to a Jungle Inc. video. And then it was actually Jungle Inc. is, you probably know, that kind of helped blow that channel up. But it was just, it was about that passion. And I'm now a business, or part business owner in a corporation that's looking at going international. So I can tell you firsthand that the lessons that I've learned from this space, and I really appreciate you saying what you did, but that entire concept of you're never 100% right. And there's actually a quote from a Tarantino film. It's a really random quote, but the quote is, the less a man makes declarative statements, less apt he is to seem foolish in retrospect. So basically what that's saying is, if you make an absolute statement and you stick by that statement indefinitely, you're an idiot. Because as things change, things move, we've seen it within this space. We see it everywhere in the world around us. You know, who would have thought pre-2020 that something like this ridiculous pandemic that just wiped out so much business, so much economy, yet certain industries thrived as a result of it. You couldn't have known that it was coming until it came. So I think it's a really good thing that we've got so many great minds within this space, like yourself and everyone in this stream, really discussing the different impacts of cryptocurrency as a whole, the underlying things around, you know, smart contracts, as we said before, NFTs, and just looking at why we should care, let alone where we can actually change and where we can make a difference to really further this technology.
No, well said, well said. So let's just have you join the conversation. We've got a couple. Channing, I don't know if you guys know, Channing does a podcast. Channing's a bright guy. Channing's talking about his wife is actually doing something with residual royalties, and my wife is doing it on Portion. Do you mean Patreon? No, I don't know what Portion is, Channing. Is that anything like Patreon? The artist can establish a 10 to 15% transaction. Oh, per transaction. Oh, that's yummy. Here we go. We got one from Kahona. Are NFTs and crypto going to be looked at the same way when it comes to regulation? Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's pretty easy right now. They're property.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to get really interesting when we start talking about the housing market and different assets existing on the blockchain. There's a lot that can come from this very prototype. NFTs are a prototype, right? Blockchain, the original blockchain was just a prototype for all of these builds that we now have. And I think we will see blockchain contribute to the real estate space and different things like that. How that pertains to NFT technology, I'm not quite sure yet. But I do think that regulation is going to play a nuanced role in all of these sectors of assets on the blockchain.
Do you think that the Flare network is going to play a big role in NFTs?
Well, I don't want to say anything for Flare Network because they have been very careful about what they have said thus far. I think that there is a lot of room. I think that Flare is going to be huge in general.
This is interesting, and it just makes you wonder. There's like so many new things coming out that it's really hard to keep up. It's almost becoming like a full-time work to even keep up with the technology. So it's been very interesting, yeah, to say the least, actually.
Possibly speaking out of turn, just in regards to the regulation question, I think asking if NFTs are going to be held the same way regulation-wise as cryptocurrencies is like saying all cryptocurrency is going to be held the same regulations. And I think you're 100% spot on, especially when it comes to something like Flare or smart contracts. Smart contracts can represent literally anything from NFTs through to agreements between two parties to anything. But we're in such a non-established space as far as, think how banking was when it first came into the online space. When you had these really clunky accounts, you could do transfers, but you couldn't really transfer to within your own little space. You were kind of using it primarily for business. Then we've gotten to where we are today. I don't know about you, but on my mobile phone, I can, transfer directly to either my favorite payees in an instant, or I can transfer one card to another and use whichever card in real time. So I think the regulation needs to exist for us to get to that point, but the regulation needs the clarity of what the maturity of the space is before we can get to that point. So it's almost a chicken or the egg type conundrum where we are seeing these nuanced legalities from a lot of different nations, and Europe has already put a lot out, Australasia, Australia, New Zealand, as well as Asia, and it's promising, but we've definitely got a really long way to go.
And one thing is one thing I've been noticing is that our governmental body and the way crypto works, there's a disconnect, right? So we might need to see some transformation in government as well as we see decentralized space in general, even decentralized internet, Web 0.3, start to emanate.
Interesting. That's really interesting. See, with one of the point that keeps coming to my mind back and forth, in Oz, I know you're probably sick of hearing this kind of stuff. It's so US centric, but until the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, does something different than classify every single digital asset project out there as property, well, that's what it's going to be. It's property. And which is great. It's great for NFTs. It's great for any of the stuff going in any traditional legacy capital market structure that dealt with properties. The people that really take it in the shorts are the XRPs and the XLMs, because they're not property. They were designed to be a currency to move here to there. And go ahead, Britta.
Do you think that the classification that the IRS has as far as it being a property and how it's taxed is actually affecting the velocity of all these coins or all these things? Because sometimes you want to exchange them, sometimes you want to use them.
Payments, for sure. The ones
but you don't want to.
An enterprise payment application, like let's just put it on the table and be real. It has screwed Ripple in the US. MoneyGram would not touch it ever. Why? Because it's not a currency, it's a property. And if they were to actually use it in flows, they would have an accounting nightmare. That's why they had to sell it the minute they got it. They took in an asset, they sold the asset, and then they had to work with a Bitstamp as the USD XRP partner to get to Bitrue. That whole deal was because MoneyGram could not use XRP as a bridge currency because the IRS classifies it as property, not a currency.
Yeah.
I think within the US space, obviously I'm outside of America, so no disrespect intended, but if you've watched any of my videos, I definitely have a lot of respect for how much global economy is controlled by the United States, but you're within the United States, so you're probably aware it's like 70% of your GDP or your marked economy is based around services and financial arrangements.
Exactly.
So there's going to be a very tight grip, and that's what we're seeing now, that does impact in the flow into those markets. But the reality is, if that grip isn't loosened, it's going to kill that market within the United States. And there is already a lot of traction in other nations to a point where it could potentially shut out a large chunk of the financial sector, which, if you want to talk about like a hypothetical around markets moving things, tokens and concepts like Sologenic, if you've ever heard of the Sologenic project, where you're tokenizing a marketplace outside of the New York Stock Exchange. Because in reality, the largest exchange in the world is the New York Stock Exchange. If you took that out of any given country and put it on a blockchain, it would completely cripple the American economy if that would happen today. And that's something that America, A, needs to worry about, but B, needs to fight to get where we're talking about, where it's so clearly defined, or at least accepted, and pushing forward this progress in order for the US people especially to not miss out, because there is just so much growth. Within Australia, for example, we have P2P electrical sharing, where you're getting cryptocurrencies if you have solar panels and you then share it within that network. People can use that currency to purchase electricity from your grid rather than from the main grid, which means you get a marked decrease in your electricity bills. It's a real world, real use scenario that just isn't happening anywhere else because
that's crazy.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's innovation.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Now, who? Let me ask you, Oz, who's facilitating this? The energy utility? Is it a state utility or something? I mean.
So basically the project, it's Power Ledger. You may have heard about it, but basically it was facilitated in Western Australia originally. So Western Australia, if you don't know anything about geography of Australia, it's basically one giant desert. Like it really is. There's a large Perth, and the coastal town is all very big business, and there's mining and all that sort of thing. So it was originally instituted by their local and state governments as a means of, I guess, decentralizing control of the energy markets over the people that were really feeding the energy markets. Miners and like literal miners, not cryptocurrency miners, literal miners and developers, which then spread out to it being supported by a number of smaller electrical companies, because it gave them more market share and more access to people rather than, I don't know what it's like in the US, but we have like 4 major providers of electricity. So if you want to be a smaller powerhouse and to be able to distribute within that, you need some sort of in through the door. So it's led to the uprising of like 3 or 4 smaller electrical companies that can utilize that asset in agreement, because it's basically federally agreed that it's completely legal, it's completely legitimate. Because one of the other things that can happen is if you're just on solar within this country and you have overage that spills into your provider you can have an agreement with that has to pay you a certain amount of money or remove that amount of money from your bill on top of whatever your solar usage might be. So it's a bit of a nuanced one, but this is exactly what we're talking about, where it's never a simple black and white, this is one solution. The reality is that type of thing could be used across anything. It's just it's an agreement and contract to be using the blockchain technology for something that's real. It's the same as supply chain management. It's the same as smart contracts. Like it limitless. It is honestly incredibly limitless. And that's the reason that I think it's so exciting.
Well, like Angelica and I were talking earlier in the stream about the dematerialization of things, right? Books now are digital on your phone. Maps are digital on your phone. You no longer need a separate camera because you got one on your phone. So many things have been dematerialized. What you're talking about, to me, says now every participant in that network of the electrical grid can now become a power provider. That to me speaks to deregulation of the utility company. Now, if I produce an overage, maybe I live near a water source, so I got hydroelectric. Maybe there's also wind on my property and I'm creating wind. Maybe I get a lot of sun and I've got solar and I got all those things working and I'm now creating a surplus. I can now monetize that surplus, become a power provider to other participants in the network. That's deregulating a utility monopoly.
To some degree, yes. I mean, the current regulation still needs, I guess, a middleman for that aspect. But you're right; it does definitely give power back to the user. But on top of that, it also encourages people to do the renewable energy thing. You know what I mean? Like, there is more reason for you to go out and put a windmill out on your property if you have a property, or to put a solar panel on your roof, because it's not just saving you a little bit of money; it's creating a sustainable market share that is only going to grow over time. Because, as we know, it's one of those things: more population means more usage means we need more supply. And it's just this incredible movement that we're seeing in such a small way right now, but it just has such unlimited potential to expand with the support of the legislation and the governments, which is...
Well, like, my mind goes, okay, so Oz, you're starting a company that's soon to be an international juggernaut, right? You're probably operating out of a commercial building. If you're successful, one day you're going to buy a commercial building. You're going to see it's more viable to own your own commercial space. Well, if you're utilizing that property, whether it be the parking lots or the roof or what have you, and generating your own power, maybe you've got extra space in your building that you're renting out. So you're renting out the actual real estate square footage, but you're also becoming the power provider for your tenants.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just mind-boggling, and all done on the blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And like, it's insane. Like, and that's
Crazy.
it's we hear so many of those things parroted time and time again. You know, unlocking true value, but that is real world sustainable growth and value to every participant, to every single person that wants to be a part of it. And I just can only hope that we continue moving forward rather than getting stopped dead in our tracks, which is what I'm concerned, obviously, from the US and the legislation of the Ripple case and all that sort of thing. I agree with you, Angelica, that there's some real strong arguments from Ripple. I don't necessarily think that they will lose. I think it may settle, but there's still a long way to go across all of those different currencies for different use cases and different purposes. Because, as you said, Jerry, you've got Ripple and XLM that are primarily about that bridge asset. They're about that currency and that exchange of value. But then you've also got these smaller environments like DApp hosts. You know, you've got Ethereum and Cardano that are looking at doing that as a host of service. So its primary value is in storing that underlying value. It's not necessarily in transferring it. But yeah.
No, there's no doubt it is going to be. Hey, Nick Black, Crypto and Coffee. Nice to see you. So,
Hey, Nick.
yeah, it's great to see Nick. I've learned so much from the guy. It's kind of what is it? It's kind of glitchy, but I'm here to support. Well, we got Australia, Costa Rica. This is a multinational show, Nick. What do you expect? So, Bitta, this is a rare treat. You got Oz and you got Angelica. Did you have it? Oz has got a deep history with XRP.
Oh, okay.
He's not just a one-trick pony. So he would be, and he's a darn smart investor.
Well, are you participating in the Flare beta right now, the Flare network beta right now? Because I'm still trying to figure out how all that stuff works. I'm still like scratching the surface.
So in short, yes, I am, and I'll speak to exactly what you're saying. I would suggest to the average person, if you are a little uncomfortable, tread lightly, but read as many guides as you can if you do really want to be part of that beta. But keep in mind, it is a beta, and the difference between the access and the accessibility of that and what it will be like once the system goes live, it will be day and night. There's a lot of testing and movement into it and a lot of feedback being received from it that is going to lead to it having to be a lot more accessible, because the Flare network, as you're probably interested in, and you've probably heard about, you know, how you can assign voting rights and then you can assign a staking to particular things. And even just on concept, to the average person, that's incredibly confusing. So until that's simplified and boiled down, I don't think there's going to be too much of a mass market movement. But what I will say is, when the market does start to go live, so you're kind of looking like May or June, I am 100% confident that you will have 6 or 7 content creators constantly churning out videos with how-to guides and how this all plays together and how it all works, as opposed to right now where there's a lot of content creators, I'm one of them as well, that's just creating content to give you the underlying understanding of what the token is for. Because until it's actually live in its final form, the beta is only really, it's a proof of concept, really. It's a, you know, this is how we want it to work in the public environment. We've gone through our alpha testing to get the bugs out, but this is about user acceptance testing and making sure that it's easy and accessible enough for the average person. So your feedback and saying how difficult it is to get into, you're 100% right, is probably what's going to lead to the live version being a lot easier to access. I don't know if that answered your question or raised more questions.
Yeah, conceptually, because originally when I was hearing about it and reading about it, I was, they say, okay, well, you can create the FXRP, and I'm like, why? Why do you need to create that? Like, what is that about? Like, what is the point of that? Like, if you have XRP, but then like the more you read into it and you understand, oh, you're putting it in the network so that they assign it, and it's like, okay, now it's at least it's starting to make sense. So it's, we're going the right way. So it's pretty confusing in the beginning, but I'm learning quite a lot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Angelica may also have some input on this as well, because she was discussing Flare before. But I think you're right. It is very confusing. But once you understand the underlying fundamentals of why that exists, it becomes a lot simpler. So the whole reason that F assets exist, so FXRP, FLTC, and all those sorts of things, is simply as a store of value within that currency being tied to the network. So that is to facilitate the ability to off-road from those smart contracts or from that network to whatever that native token is, while also tying value directly into that network. So the whole purpose, the whole reason that it exists, is to represent that token's value in a network that isn't for that token. So obviously it's created so that you can bridge from the XRP ledger to it, but it's not the XRP ledger. It can't natively host XRP, but it can natively host a representation of XRP, which is what the reasoning is for the FXRP.
Well, I'll tell you, what I thought, in kudos to Nick Black, understanding game theory and behavioral economics, right, which is kind of the root of this thing. For these networks, like let's call them third gen blockchain stuff, for lack of a better classification, to incentivize users to bring liquidity to the network, right, requires something. They've got to get something, and you know what? I think all of us are over the likes and little heart emojis as far as that kind of incentive. I mean, I do like positive affirmation and positive feedback. I like likes and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really more concerned about, at the end of the day, money. Mm-hmm. And these networks have figured out we need to incentivize with money.
Yes.
Well, there you have it. Bring your collateral, dump that liquidity on our platform, right, on our network. Everybody can benefit from it in one way or another. But again, back to you, when you do that, you're on your friggin' own. There is no lawyer who's going to be able to come and say, unfortunately, Jerry passed away and he had X in your little decentralized liquidity pool thing. We'd like to get that for his children. Flare Networks is going to say, I'm sorry, friggin' thing we can do to help the guy. Sorry about that.
I do think, though, staying involved in the community space, right? Everybody's really kind. The discourse group, there are a lot of conversations going on, across multiple social media platforms. So as far as like having questions, like the more you sit in those rooms, like Jerry said, there are no dumb questions. And with blockchain's so new, like even people that are so dialed in, like we have questions all the time, right? So it's just about, putting yourself in those rooms, asking the questions, and little by little taking in what you can over time, so that, like we said, when there is a more user-friendly, we're out of the beta stage, you'll be ready to go at that point.
I'll tell you what I see as an emerging opportunity in this space is we need a trusted consultant. We need I'll be the first to tell you, I'm in this space all day long, but most of my time is spent trying to understand capital markets, trying to understand the economy, trying to understand the greater world, and then what these digital assets are trying to accomplish within the scope of that. So all the minutia Flare Networks or Flare Finance or this or that and the other thing. There's a lot of other wonderful people that are up to their friggin' eyeballs in it and that I trust that I'll listen to. But there's nobody I can pick up the phone and go, hey, I'll pay you $100 to get on Zoom, screen share, and walk me through this thing in 5 minutes because I don't have 4 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours to invest in making this happen. And I do not believe I'm alone.
No, I think we're going to see a rise of DeFi consultants. I don't even just mean for Flare, right? I mean, as the crypto space grows, these DeFi platforms, we're going to have, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And all of them are different, right? So I think we're going to see a rise in people that are subject matter experts that actually are charging consulting fees to do those types of things.
I think paying somebody for their expertise.
Well, just to further what you were saying, I've literally had probably 15 or 20 messages through my different platforms over the last month or so asking exactly that, or do you offer this sort of service? Do you know anyone who does? And the answer really is no, because I don't necessarily trust anyone at this time in the marketplace that wouldn't just take my money and run away, because we're in such a space where, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, it's not like cryptocurrency is not legal tender. There is no right to any value outside of its immediate transfer within that marketplace right now. It's not like a share or a stock where you're purchasing a holding within an established marketplace, and if a company goes broke or whatever it may be, there is an actual movement there. There is no tangible ability outside of the market itself and its movements right now to be making any guarantees. So until there is, I guess, regulation and clarity around private keys and all that sort of gear, I would actually be very, very careful about engaging with anyone who is claiming to be willing to give you that sort of information, at least at anything that is a reasonable cost. Because if anyone had all the silver bullets, I'm sure you've seen the TA chart readers and those that buy into the psychology of trading, which is a very real thing. But it's still very, very limited by this marketplace. So anyone who tells you that they'll take you $10 and they'll turn into $1,000 is probably a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, they're full of shit.
That's where the divide is. Exactly. That if it's too good to be true, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, for
Agreed.
sure. One of the wonderful things that I've been really fortunate that, I don't know, I have migrated or gravitated. I have gravitated to this like big handful of people that over the course of the last 3 years has demonstrated a certain amount of integrity, a certain amount of humility in that when they're wrong, they cop to it, and, et cetera. And it's been a wonderful journey. And I have grown to trust a pretty sizable handful of people in a space that is filled with charlatans and snake oil salesmen. And that really kind of is the journey we all share that journey in one way, shape, or form. We all have our war stories and scars on our backs to show we've been in the battle, right? But luckily, if we, the consistent ones that keep showing up, we get to connect with them in one way or another. I mean, it was great to have Oz in the stream and then come on here. I met Nick Black on a thing like this, and we became buddies, and we've done each other's shows on and off. Bidda, I met through this. Bidda and I go back, almost 8-9 months now. You're a regular now on the show. And really,
time flies.
Yeah. But I mean, it's over time we get to see the hype lasts a very short period of time, I guess is what I'm getting to. And substance is what we see over time. A person's character will be revealed over time. You can fool anybody in one 30-minute YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
Try having a YouTube video channel over a couple of years.
Yes.
And don't listen to the dude scrapping his lips on the video. Watch the chat and the people that follow him consistently and see how they are. They'll tell you exactly what that dude is.
Yes.
If the dude on the channel has got any money, is worth anything, the people in the chat will represent that.
Yes.
Because quality sees quality, integrity tends to gravitate towards integrity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At least that's my experience from an old guy.
No, I agree. I think a lot about how unbearable the last year may have been if I wasn't in the crypto space, because it kind of has been a life raft for me because I love the community so much. I'm so so many exciting things are happening, and I look around me and mental health and everything with COVID's at an all-time low. And I'm like, I'm so grateful for the good people like you guys that I have met, and the people in Clubhouse. And yeah, I agree with you, Jerry. Over time, real recognizes real, and over time, you find out who's good people.
Yeah, over time, for sure, for sure. So if anybody, oh, hey, M. Plowman, nice to have you. Haven't seen you in the stream before. Any last questions for either Oz Crypto, the man down under, Bit of Ab from the United States, or Angelica? Fire away. We'll give them the 8-second delay to get to that. I would like you guys to think in this moment of silence your final thoughts. Oz, one of the things I do at the end of every show is give each guest an opportunity to just kind of, final thoughts. Bit is accustomed to it. Angelica has seen it before. Elvis Lives, nice to have you. Travis, one of my Patreon buddies is here. Good to have you, Travis. Channing, thank you so much for the super chat, man. Really appreciate it. Channing, we got to get you on the show, man. Channing does a nice podcast. Always active. You guys got to check him out. Travis, interesting stuff, that's for sure. All right, I'm not seeing any questions come through. Let's dive in to some final thoughts, which means, Brady, I'm giving you a clue. You're coming in about 6-7 minutes, so get your stuff ready. Bitta, let's start with you, young lady.
My final thought is, I guess now that I'm starting on Monday, I'm cutting down on work to study the crypto world a little bit deeper. I am looking forward to it. So I'll be reaching out to people and learning a little bit more. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's my final thought.
Well, thank you for making the time in your life and time away from your little one to come share with us tonight. It's always a joy, Bitta, to have you on the show.
Thank you.
See you backstage. Angelica, you're up. Final thoughts, young lady. What are you thinking?
I would just say to remind, one thing I've been reminding everybody lately is just remember, as crypto gets more popular, that the wealth isn't in the crypto. The wealth is in the freedom and the time that you get with your loved ones, and that financial freedom allows you to have because of crypto and the constraints that it lifts off of us, off of a corrupt financial system.
Interesting. Nice little parting shot at the establishment. That a girl. All right, we'll see you backstage, Angelica. Hey, Oz, final thoughts from Down Under, brother. Good to have you on the show, number one. Thank you. Maybe you'll come back again.
Absolutely, mate. And I well expect I'll be messaging you, and we'll need to stay in contact because there's obviously some really great content that I've been missing out on. So my final thoughts on this are obviously that within this space, there's always so much more that you can learn. There's so much more constantly happening. And it's almost gets to the point of, like studying a degree where even after you've gotten that degree and you're working in an industry, you're constantly learning, you're constantly developing more because the space is evolving around you. And we're in such a great time right now that all that knowledge is there. You just need to be willing to look for it, listen for it. And if you have it, share it with the people around you. So that's all I have for now.
Right on. Well, Oz, we do a little after show. So if you want to hang out and do the kind of off camera, we can cuss and everything. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to.
All right. I'll see you backstage in a sec. Hey, Brady, bring yourself in, young man. The dreaded dead air. Can you believe it? Brady. No, Brady? I know you're there. I can see you. I see you lurking. Come on, Brady. Simon, hey, Simon. Nice to see you, man. And no Brady. Okay, I'll tell you what, folks. I'll give you my final thoughts. Barno McBarno. Nice to have you, man. I just got you in the stream. So, my final thoughts. It's been a very interesting week in that seems like not a lot's going on in prices. I mean, some are jumping, some are going on. So that market kind of exhilaration that we got late January and early February kind of really slowed down. But the exciting thing is we're still over $1.4 trillion market cap. This market is growing up. Bitcoin has de-risked itself to a large segment of the institutional investing population. This bodes very well for us as investors. And with that, let's bring in producer extraordinaire for his final thoughts. Brady, fire away. What are you thinking about, young man?
Thinking about how I actually had never added either myself or anyone else through StreamYard while on the stream. And it's weird. It's the first time I ever did that. Interesting. So now I'm here. Final thought. As Oz had mentioned, this knowledge is kind of everywhere. So it's kind of your duty to think through what's the most important to you at this point in your life and just dig as deep as you feel comfortable digging to, you know, get comfortable with what you have to get comfortable with. And for me, that's digital identity. So that's one thing that I have to explore more on. And I will leave you with this question. And it kind of popped into my head and I'm not sure from where, but what's the price of risk if it were for sale? And that's my final thought. Have a good night.
I think that's a whole new section for the show. Deep thoughts.
Chew on that.
Deep thoughts from Brady. Okay, we'll see you backstage in just a minute, brother. Wow, that's an interesting thing. You know what I was thinking? The price of risk. So I don't know if I'm in a position to answer that question right this second, but what I will tell you, the price of education in this space is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. The longer I stay, the easier it is for me to spot the folks that I want to continue to listen to over and over and over again. And for that, I'm truly grateful because I believe my education is growing exponentially, which helps others because people are reaching out to me just like I'm sure they're reaching out to you. Hey, I heard you in crypto. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Well, I can tell you one of the things that I'm thinking about right now, and I think it's really been helpful for me as an investor, and that is this year, well, I'd say probably starting fourth quarter of last year to now, it is becoming very clear that we're starting to get divisions in this overall crypto space where I can actually start to categorize things, right? Bitcoin is the clear store of value. It's gained a high enough market cap. It's an institutional grade product now. Excellent, great. Store of value, check. We've got projects that have established themselves as layer one solutions. Ethereum is not the only game in town as it pertains to programmable money, right? We've seen the rise of Cardano. We've seen DOT get a tremendous amount of exposure. There are projects like Cosmos and Tezos and Zilliqa out there, right? There are projects that people don't even know about yet. Matter of fact, Nick Black turned me on to one called Near Protocol, which is part of the Coinbase incubation initiative, right? These layer one solutions, they're going to be many, right? Some of them will find special niches and carve out market share in particular use case segments, and others will be very universal. Who will be the final winner? I don't know if there is one, but I know one of the things that I'm really looking at is interoperability. I'm really high on quant right now. I could change my mind in a week with new information, but I really like the idea of an overledger protocol for interconnecting these various blockchain projects as well as capital market industries all into one seamless overlapping protocol This, to me, this interoperability thing, I think is going to be really big. We'll see if it works. Wi-Fi sure has done a really good job of that, right? Maybe Overledger will do the same. I don't know. We'll see. But folks, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you right here next week, Friday night on Market Conversations. And until next time, Pura Vida.